Hi, welcome to this next episode. Today I'm chatting with Clare Coleman. Clare served with the Adjutant General's Corps and was posted at 3 RHA in Hohne. Today Clare talks about why she joined the army, her time in training, along with serving with 3 RHA. Clare then goes on to talk about the next chapter of her life and the difficulties that her and her family have faced. If you like this podcast or the previous ones, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Frankie'sPod. It just goes to help fund the software and the hosting. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're talking to Clare Coleman. Clare was in the Adjutant General's Corps and served with 3 RHA for a while. Hiya Clare, how are you doing?
Hiya, I'm good, thank you.
So if you'd just like to tell us, to start with, where you grew up, why you joined the army, what it was like, and why you left.
Okay. So I grew up in a little seaside village, really, outside of Dartmouth, which is strange I joined the army, really, because Dartmouth is the home of the Royal Britannia Naval College.
Yeah.
So, so where I grew up was always a lot of naval officers around. But it was a bit of a remote village. So as teenagers, we were kind of cut off, even from the town. The town was quite a small town, not much happening. It was quite boring, not a lot to do other than get drunk, really. I grew up with my brother and sister. We're all quite close, so we were born, 3 of us, within 3 years. And I was the youngest, which was that's quite difficult being the youngest. I always kind of felt that I was the mistake child, the one they couldn't really afford, but they had it, just the extra one. And I was a bit of a nightmare teenager. And we got sent, the schools near where we lived were just state schools. And my dad had a big thing that he wanted us to go to grammar school because that was the best school around. So we all went to grammar school. But the travel to that school, each end of the day was about an hour. So we used to go in the car from our village to Dartmouth, get on a passenger ferry, go across the river on a ferry, walk up this big massive hill and get on a coach and go to school. So you can imagine how annoying that was. Anything after school activities, we had to then catch public transport buses home, which took about 2 hours. So if I had anything I wanted to do after school, it was a 2-hour trip then home.
Yeah.
And all my friends lived on this opposite side of the river. So if I wanted to do anything at the weekends, everyone was over an hour away. And it was a massive issue of transport and stuff. And so it was quite isolating. And I got quite fed up at school. I wasn't particularly well behaved, and grammar school was quite strict. And when I did my GCSEs, my dad said, you've got 2 options. You either go back to school and do your A-levels, or you get a full-time job.
Fair enough.
And I was always quite sporty at school. Enjoyed activities, stuff like that. So I thought, well, I didn't really know what to do. But during year 11, our last year, the careers officer, the army careers, come in on the careers day. And you know what I did? They did the hard sell. They did the whole adventure training, see the world. It'll be really exciting.
Yeah.
I was only 16. And this was back in maybe 1996. So the options then, being under 18, was you were too young to join the regulars. So they said, go to the Army Apprentices College. So when I joined in 1996, straight from school, so I finished school in the June, July, went to the Army Apprentices College in Arborfield in the September. So I originally joined the Royal Signals.
All right.
So Arborfield was the REME and the Royal Signals. It was just REME, but the Royal Signals had relocated from Harrogate about a year or so before the Apprentice College. So I was at Arborfield. And that was really fun. I had a really, really good time there. Because although it's basic training, it's also, you do a lot of lessons we did MVQs and things like that. But we were on exercise, one of our final exercises, and we were dug in on Salisbury Plain. Great place that is. Yeah. And I collapsed. And first of all, they thought it was because obviously I wasn't eating much on exercise. Cooking was a bit of a bore. I wasn't a big fan of rations. And they sort of got me warm and stuff, and then was like, "You ready to go again?" So I went again. And then in the middle of the night, I collapsed again. And they took me to Salisbury Hospital. And I'd had a ruptured appendix.
Jesus.
So I was actually really poorly. I was in Salisbury Hospital for, I think, about 10 days. So I was 17 by then. So I was 17 on my own in a hospital with no visitors really, because everyone from the camp obviously couldn't get anywhere near me. My mum and dad did come up and visit me, and they'd moved me ward. So I was in a ward, and then they had to move me to another ward, but the ward I'd been on had some infection. So they moved me to another ward, and I was in a room on my own, completely on my own. And it was like something out of the third world, no word of a lie. It was just a bed in a room, and I had to ring to get a commode in if I wanted to go to the toilet, anything. And they come in with all their aprons on, gloves. And so my mum and dad turned up, and my dad said to me, he said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And I said, "Dad, I just really want a fag." And he went, "All right." So he picked me up out of the bed onto this window, this high up windowsill, opened the window a bit, going, "Go on. No one's coming in. They haven't been in for hours." So yeah, he picked me up, put me on the windowsill, and I had a fag out the window. And that was probably the best moment I had while I was in that hospital. So after that, they took me, when I was discharged from hospital, they took me back to the college at Arborfield, and I went straight into the med centre where I had to be on bed rest for however long. Some of the guys come over and visited me and stuff, but I was just a bit fed up by them. And so by the time I got back into the squad, they'd all been practicing for the final pass-out parade. I still wasn't allowed to march or anything. I had a boyfriend back home, and I really missed him. And I was just like, do you know what? I don't really want to do this. So because I was still in the college, you could still discharge.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's it, I'm going home. So cut a long story short, I left. Me and my dad had a bit of a fallout because obviously he didn't want me to leave, especially for a boyfriend.
Yeah.
So I did leave. I moved in with my boyfriend and his parents. It didn't really work out after a couple of months, so I basically thrown away everything for nothing.
Shit happens though, doesn't it?
It does, and I was like 17. That's what happens. And then I kicked around back at home for a bit. Remembered why I left because it was shit and there was nothing to do. Did a couple of jobs. I worked in a care home as a care assistant for a bit, but it was never my long-time goal. So I'd made up with my mum and dad. I moved back home. My dad said, "What is it you want to do?" And I said, "I really miss the army. I want to give it another go." So back we went to the careers office, and then by the time I just turned 18 then, and so I could sign up for the regulars. It wasn't an issue, and they were like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, I found the signals. Like we'd been down to Blandford and stuff like that while we were at the college, and I thought the signals it seemed to me it was a bit boring. I only really joined because it was all about like your exam grades then and like what you could get into. And I was like, "Oh, I really fancy the military police." I thought that'd be cool. Yeah, I know. Right? Imagine.
They can't see the face I've just pulled.
I know. Well, we'll never know. So when I rejoined, I went to ATR Winchester. And obviously the military police is part of the ADC, so it's a mixed platoon with the ADC and people wanting to go into the RMP side of that. So I did phase one again. I had to do the whole thing again. But actually that was really good because I was the best recruit on that, but that was probably because I'd only just done it like a year before. But I still had the best time in training. It was probably one of the best times of my army career. I loved basic training. Absolutely loved it. So I passed out of there, and then there was a backlog at Chichester for military police. They'd over-recruited, basically, and they couldn't get everyone through Chichester quick enough. So we were put in a holding platoon. So they said, oh, we're going to send you off to units just to do some work experience with an RMP unit. So me and my best mate at the time, we got sent off to Colchester, and we were with the RMP unit in Colchester. And I thought, oh, that'd be really cool. It's near, MTCC. We might see something good. But actually, no, it was crap, and I hated it. Absolutely hated it.
So what cap badge did you have then?
I still had the SPS cap badge.
Right.
We were just there on work experience. Anyway, I hated it. And then I went to see the sergeant major there, and I said, I'm not really enjoying this. And he said, we'll send you back to Worthy Down. So I went back to Worthy Down, and they were like, what is it you want to do? It's theme here. And I never really know. I still don't know what I want to do. And I was like, I don't know, might fancy the REME or something. And he was like, I tell you what, while you're here, why don't you just do the SPS course? And by the time I got back there was a platoon there from Winchester who had been a couple of squads behind us when I went through training. So I knew a few of them. So I did my course with them. We had an absolute blast. We called it Disney Down. We just literally worked all day on the piss all night. It was brilliant. And then once I'd completed that training, they were like, well, that's it now. You're AGC SPS. We're posting you.
I don't know if you're aware, but in 1986, Worthy Down opened the All Arms Clerks course before the AGC was there. And I was on the first course. I used to be a clerk.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Can't imagine
I was shit and I got sacked. I got sacked within about 8 months and put in a gun battery. It was the best thing that ever happened.
Right. So then, we put in for our postings. Everyone had said, Germany's great, go to Germany. So I put in for Germany. And so did all the other girls I was on the course with. And they all got Senelager, Gütersloh. And I got Hohne, and everyone was like, oh, where's that? You don't want to go there. That's a shithole. I'm like, yeah, great. That's where I'm going. So I got to third, probably, when did I go to third? June 1998. So they hadn't been there that long since they'd swapped with 40.
Yeah.
So so it was all, there was a lot of ill feeling. There was quite a lot of people who didn't really want to be there at that time. So my first job when I got to third I was the regimental clerk. So I did all the booking in of all the letters, took the file to the adjutant, all that sort of bullshit. So I did that for a few months. And then I went to QM Techs. And I don't know if you remember, I can't remember, he was the major, he was the old QM Tech, tall guy, short blonde hair, really strict bloke. I can't for the life of me remember his name.
No, I can't.
He'd come up through the ranks.
Cheryl.
And everyone was scared of him.
Stacker Cheryl.
No, I don't think it was.
I can't remember.
But yeah, so he was the QM Tech, and he was a strict bloke, but he was actually with his own staff. He was really, really good. And there was a couple of blokes there left over from 40, I think, like Stu Cunningham and another guy, he was a full screw, dark hair, Tash. And I can't remember his name. And then I think Will Moore was around, but they all really looked after me up there. So I did that for a bit, and then they were like, right, you're going to be a battery clerk. And that's when I got moved then to J Battery. Which I was a bit scared of, because at the time, the BSM, he'd just taken over, Cole, who I absolutely adore. But all the lads were quite scared of him. He was quite strict. But as it happened, he turned out to be a bit of a dad to me, really. But we had a few, before that, when I first moved in there, we had a girls' block. Before we all lived with the batteries you were in, there was a girls' block. It was right down in the far corner. And there were some chefs in there, the new girls that came over. And there was one girl there, and she was a chef, and she was pregnant. And she fell asleep one night and burnt her room down. She fell asleep with a fag. and burnt her room down. And she was pregnant. And we were all outside, and I always thought like Hohne camp was quite eerie anyway. And when we went back into the block after the fire brigade had put the fire out and stuff, luckily I hadn't been in when the fire happened. I was probably off doing something I shouldn't have been doing, but I wasn't there anyway. We all went back into the block and my door had been locked, so my room was actually okay. I had to wash my bed and stuff, it smelled a bit, but my room was okay. But we went in her room and the whole room was absolutely gutted, like the bed, like curtains, carpet, the whole place was thing. And then she'd bought a load of baby clothes and they were all hung up in one of the wardrobes. And when we opened the door of that wardrobe, they were all still perfectly lined up, not smoke, damn, nothing. They were all just like brand new clothes. It was the weirdest, it was just weird. And then after that, we moved upstairs for a bit and then we went to Bosnia, didn't we? That's it. Yeah. We went to Bosnia. And when we went to Bosnia, I was still then the HQ clerk because I went to Banja Luka to start with the adjutant. And then part of that role was you doubled up to be like the CO's escort vehicle.
Yeah.
So we got out travelling quite a bit. We went out and visited, like when he went out and did the visits on the outposts and stuff. We went in the second vehicle and followed them around, which was quite cool. And then halfway through the tour, I was swapped with another clerk. And that's when I went to like the QMs and QM techs down at Yahtzee, I think it was called Yahtzee.
Yahtzee, yeah, I think so, yeah.
And there was a wall outside that camp with like all these like bullet holes. So it was a long wall, long grey wall with all these bullet holes. And there was all these bullet holes and they were all around about the same height. And then about 3/4 of the way down, the bullet holes were like child height. And that stuck with me forever. Absolutely stuck with me, seeing that. And we used to do like gate guard there. And bearing in mind we had a cookhouse there, and then which was about 15 meters away from where you slept when you were on guard. So you could go and go to the cookhouse for meals and switch on guard and stuff. But they used to give you a guard box full of food, sausage rolls, crisps, everything. And we used to get these kids used to come and beg at the gate. And I used to just get the whole guard box and put a whole thing over the gate. And that didn't please the lads at all. Not one bit. Like, you've got food there. So those sort of things, especially now, I think I look back and I've got children of my own, seeing these kids coming begging at the gate for food, that was quite tragic. I did get to do one thing though. So when partway through the tour, I got to go off with, I think there was some people from the intelligence corps, but they were doing a G5 project, doing some work on a nearby school. And I got to go out with them for 2 weeks. And part of that, we went down to Sarajevo. And I went into the camp there. And that was an American camp. No word of a lie, walked into that camp. They had a proper PX store, whole clothing store. There was a Pizza Hut. There was a version of McDonald's. It was like literally a village in this shithole, like nothing I've ever seen. So I had a good week there. That was fun. And they didn't have a 2-cam rule or anything. They just had bars.
Yeah.
Bars with karaoke. Proper, they even had an Irish bar.
Yeah, we all stuck to our 2-can rule while we were in Bosnia. Honest.
Yeah, we did. Yes, we did.
Yeah, 2 fucking jerry cans.
So that was Bosnia. And then obviously we went back to camp. We spent some time in camp. And there was a Reggie exercise. So I was in J Battery then. There was a regimental exercise. And I was on the rear party for that. Because, I don't know, I think the BSM was on a course, so he wasn't going. Because normally on exercise, as a clerk, you're the BSM's driver. So I had to, but J Battery offices were being painted. So all the pictures and stuff being taken down. And I had the key. Bearing in mind, J Battery block was right next door, wasn't it, to the office block.
Yeah.
And so I had to be there to open up for the civvy painters were coming in to do this painting. Anyway, so me and some of the others have been out on the piss. the night before, and we'd got back, because bars don't shut in Germany, do they? So we'd got back probably about 6:30 in the morning. I was hanging. I'd obviously fallen asleep, set an alarm, woke up. It was like 8 o'clock. I thought, I've got to go and open up for these painters. So I threw a tracksuit on, ran next door, ran upstairs, opened up for the civvy painters who were all just kind of stood there. Thought, I better go. Like, ran back downstairs, just over to the block. So as I'm running between the blocks, the RSM's there with his dog, Carl Britton.
Yeah.
So he stood there with his dog, and he looked at me and he was like, "Private White, what are you doing?" And I was like, I just had to open up for the painters there. And he was like, "But what are you doing?" And I said, he said, "You look really red." And I said, "I've just been for a run." So I'm just going to go back. Well, technically I had. I was like, I've just got to go back next door. I'm just going to go for a shower and then I'll be at work. And he was like, "All right." And I was like, and as I was just about to walk away, he went, "White." I turned around. I was like, "Yes, sir." And he went, "Just so you know," dry sense of humour, didn't he? "Just so you know," he went, "your tracksuit bottoms are the wrong way around and your jumper's inside out." It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So, yeah, that was a good moment. But I think I did enjoy being in Germany. I missed home. I was still quite young when I was over there. So I did find some of it quite tough, being away, a young girl. I met a lot of good friends though. And then obviously the regiment went to Kosovo, and I was supposed to go out. I was supposed to do half that tour. So I asked to do the second half of the tour. But when it came to it, the lad who I was supposed to swap with said that he was happy to stay out there. So I stayed on rear party. And that's when, obviously, I got together with Jim. He was on rear party as well. And yeah, once we got married and decided to have a family, I decided that the army wasn't really the place that I wanted to do that. Although I've missed out something, and people will be upset if I don't mention it, the car crash. Do you remember the car? Do you remember my car crash?
Was I back in the regiment then? Because I was away for most of your time.
Yeah, well, you might have been. But so I had, obviously we had NATO. Do you remember NATO cars?
Yeah.
So I bought a brand new Fiesta as my first car, bought 3 NATO cars. And because it was Ford. Ford did this thing at the time where they did a year's free insurance. So obviously I crashed my car one night down the back of the old girls' HQ block right in the back corner.
Yeah.
Didn't have a seatbelt on, come through the windscreen, and the car had actually hit the curb and then launched and wedged between 2 trees. And I was on the bonnet of the car. Anyway, I think a couple of the lads who were then living in that block, they had heard a noise come out. Luckily, they did. So I was recovered, went off to hospital. And obviously, I got charged. But I didn't get charged with drink driving by law because I was on the army garrison. What did happen was I got charged by the Germans for the trees, the damage to the trees, because they were quite prissy about their trees.
Yeah.
I had to go down to the garrison sergeant major of 7th Armour Brigade, because when I'd gone through the barrier, like the trees and the fence, I'd actually taken out the whole camp security and left a big hole.
Right.
So, yeah, I got a massive bollocking for that. And then I got obviously charged by the army. I think 500 quid. I got charged by the regiment for that. But I'd got my Lance Jack about a month before that hearing, and everyone was like, "You're going to get bust, you're going to get bust." But the RSM kind of saved me, and I didn't get bust. I did just get a £500 fine. But the whole irony of that story is because I bought that car through Nato Cars and it was tax-free. When I contacted insurance to say I'd written the car off, I didn't have to say it was for drink driving because I hadn't been charged for drink driving. So they took it as an accident. The assessor came out, said the car was a write-off. They said it was an accident. And then the money I got for the car was the UK price of the car. So I actually made $2,000 crashing that car. Oh. And then I didn't know because I tried not to do a lot of fizz, but we did a BFT one day. And when they described the route of the BFT, they were like, you go round the old parade square of the middle bit, and then you go down. You go down to White's Corner, turn left. And when I actually did the run, and I hadn't been back down that way, did the run, someone had put up a little black sign with white writing that actually said on it, White's Corner, on that corner. So that was either somebody trying to, be funny, or, I could be offended, but it was funny.
Yeah.
So then I decided to leave, have a family. And that was that with the army.
That's a shame, isn't it, really? But hey, that's the way life goes, isn't it?
I mean, there was a lot of regrets.
Yeah, of course there is. I mean, there is when anyone gets, when most people get out, especially if they've made a choice like that, and you sit back in hindsight thinking about what could have been or whatever, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. Obviously, coming out to Civvy Street, because Jim got out as well, but he'd been in longer than me, so he qualified for resettlement, but I didn't, because my service prior to being 18 didn't count then.
No, yeah.
Settlement. So although I'd done 6 years in total, I hadn't done 6 years since being 18. So I didn't get the packages that he did. So we both really struggled when we come out. When you leave, there is nothing. You literally hand your kit back and leave.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'd only recently got married. I was pregnant at the time. I wanted to come back near my family because that's kind of where I wanted to be. They'd all moved by then from my little sleepy village and lived the other side of the river where I wanted to be. And my mum had a house, but she'd also bought a flat that she was renting out. So she rented us her flat when we first got out. So we did have somewhere to live.
Were you getting mates rates, were you?
Yeah.
Good.
I didn't really have a job. I was like 8 months pregnant at the time.
Yeah.
And that was my start in civvy life, really. So we were in the flat. Obviously, I was pregnant. I'd left the army a couple of weeks before Jim. He managed to get home just before our son was born. So we had William, our baby boy, and he was just the most beautiful boy I've ever seen, and life was really good. We had a few weeks with him, and then he wasn't feeding properly. So we went to the doctors for a checkup, and they did a test where they hold their arms and see if they tilt their head back. And he didn't really tilt his head back. And the doctor said to us it was something they see in some babies called floppy head syndrome, to do with muscle tone. So he said, don't be alarmed, but I'm going to call an ambulance and send you to the hospital. So obviously we were very alarmed. So he sent us to the hospital, and we were admitted to the children's ward. And they did some blood tests on him. And these different doctors kept coming in and doing this thing where they held his arms and kind of tried to sit him up. Bearing in mind he was only 4 or 5 weeks old, to see if he could hold his head. And I don't know if you've ever seen a baby, but when they get scared, they're startled, and they kind of their arms go. And when they did that to him, he kind of only did like it with one arm slightly. He didn't do it with both. So he didn't do the baby startled thing. So they did this blood test and said they were sending it off, and they'd let us know. But they gave us some different teats for the bottles, and said to try them to help him to feed. So we went home, and then after a week, we got an outpatient appointment, and we got called to the hospital, and we went to see it was actually the top paediatric consultant we saw, and we sat in this room for ages. And then he came in with like an entourage of other doctors. So I think there was about like 4 or 5 of them. And he laid him on the couch. And again, he did this thing where he pulled his arms and his head, and he did the startled thing with him. And then he got us to dress him and gave him William back to me, and said, so we've had the blood test results back. He's got something called spinal muscular atrophy. Obviously that wasn't something we'd ever heard of. Basically he told us that it was like a degenerative muscle problem, where the signals don't go to the brain properly. So the muscle signals to move and to feed and to swallow don't sort of coagulate with the brain. And he kind of talked to us about that, but we weren't really getting what he was saying. And there was no smiles in this room. It was like a really cold atmosphere. And he was talking, saying, this wasn't a condition that would get better. It was something that would only get worse. And I can still visualize sitting in this room. And I just said to him near the end of the conversation, I said, are you telling me that my baby's going to die? And he just said, I'm afraid he is.
Wow. Fucking hell.
And yeah, it was just, wow. And to look at him, he was absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. He was just a brilliant baby. He slept, he smiled, his eyes lit up. So to be told that, because he wasn't feeding, they sent us to a specialist unit and said that what they could do to get him to feed was they could put in a nasal gastric tube and show us how to do that and to feed him. So we stayed for a week in a specialist unit where we learned how to do the feeding, monitor his SATs. There was a thing, because with this condition, he wasn't able to cough or sort of expel anything for himself. So like he would have like sort of secretions and things. So they showed us how to use like a suction machine. And also because his muscles weren't working brilliantly, his oxygen levels were always quite low. So they organised for us to have home oxygen and a nasal gastric tube. And we went home. And while we were at the unit, they said to us, there's things you can claim, there's benefits and things like you can look into to help, because obviously I couldn't work because I'd have to care for him. And I think Jim went out in the corridor and spoke to another consultant that was down seeing us at the time. And she basically said to him, well, because he asked if like she could sort the forms so that we could get them sent off, to get a bit of financial help. Why I couldn't work, because he was working, but he didn't really want to work. And she basically said to him at that point, I could, but it probably won't happen, in time.
Fuck me.
I mean, if anyone knows Jim, he almost had this consultant by the throat against a wall at that point. And we went home and tried to live the best life with him we could. I don't think at that point, he was 8 weeks old then. I don't think I realised, because I think what we were told was a lot of children at that point might see their first birthday, definitely wouldn't see their second birthday. I was 23, just turned 23. how do you cope with that sort of news at that age when I was kind of probably still really quite immature and young myself, to be told that?
Yeah.
And we did things. We had days out. We took oxygen cylinders around with us. We fed him from a tube. We learnt how to suction, and we really got on. But when he was 11 weeks old and 4 days, he died in my arms at home. And I think that loss of that beautiful boy has kind of changed completely at that point, changed me as a person.
I can imagine it would. Yeah.
Absolutely massively. You really learn to grow up really quickly to suffer such a massive loss, and the heartache that I've carried from that moment every day until now was just massive. It's an unfathomable, unfair, unjust thing to have happened to him. And it's really hard. Looking back now, I think our world fell apart, literally stopped turning at that point. And it's really difficult with loss because the rest of the world doesn't stop turning.
No.
It really doesn't. And, that beautiful boy will be in my heart forever.
I mean, you've got the memories. That's what a stupid fucking thing to say.
It is, isn't it? What do you say? There isn't nothing. There isn't anything you can say. There isn't any way I can make this better. What I can do and what I've done since is make sure my 3 other boys and my 2 stepchildren, they all know about him. Yeah. He's not a secret. He's talked about. We have his pictures. He's still very much involved. We still go there every Christmas Day. We all go to the cemetery. And, his birthday, it just becomes part of your life. And then, after sort of you don't get over it, but you have to learn to keep living.
Yeah. Like you say, you don't get over it, but
you just have to learn to keep putting one foot in front of the other.
And they say it gets easier. It doesn't. It just gets more bearable.
Yeah, you just learn to, bear it a bit better.
So what did you end up doing for work or anything?
Yeah, so I went back. I did some care work for a bit. Yeah. And then I put together a CV, thought, I've done a lot of clerical stuff. I'd rather be doing that. So I went through a job agency and got a job at a firm of solicitors doing personal injury claims. So I worked there for a few years, had my other children, had Jack and Charlie, and I built up to being the office manager there. So that was all working out quite nicely. And then we both got letters, Jim and I both got letters about going back in the army, and I think it was with 40 Reg, his was definitely, and going to do a tour in Iraq. And they offered a bounty, a tax-free sum on top of being paid. I think it was about $8,000 at that time to go back and do that. And we'd just recently bought a house. But I was really settled in my job. I was settled at home. I didn't want to do it. And he decided that he did. So he went back. He rejoined 40 because he'd actually tried to get back in the army, but there was something wrong with his hearing. But he was allowed to go back and be a reservist and go to Iraq. That was cool. But so he went to Iraq for a bit. And I think that decision of him doing that and me staying at home, that was kind of it for us.
Yeah.
It was hard anyway. It was hard. earning enough money, keeping a house, 2 young children. So that was, and I went out and I met my now husband 18 years ago. So it's been quite a long time.
God, hasn't it?
Yeah. So, and there we are now. So I'm now the proud owner of collectively 5 children. I say children, only one's really a child still. The rest are all 18 upwards. So
yeah. Well, I've got 2 children and 5 grandkids.
A lot of children about. I wouldn't change it. So, I had a few careers changes. I did the solicitors for a bit and then got a bit fed up with that. I took a break for about 6 months and then I joined the NHS. So that's where I currently am. I've worked within cancer services for the past 14 years now.
Wow.
I've done oncology outpatients, I've done radiotherapy coordination, and now I'm a chemotherapy coordinator.
I don't know if it's a job I'd like to do, to be honest.
I think, obviously, I'm very invested in cancer services. I've been there for a long time. And it was all good until 2 years ago when my husband was actually at 42 diagnosed with rectal cancer.
Is it? I mean, I'm just like kind of taken aback you saying that there. It's not something that's at the forefront of people's minds. I mean, many people think of blokes with, pancreatic cancer or whatever like that, or, but they don't think of rectal cancer.
No, absolutely not.
I'm not sorry for interrupting you. I was just like taken aback a bit. I didn't even. I mean, obviously you can get cancer anywhere, but I don't know. Sorry to interrupt you. Carry on.
So he was diagnosed. Yeah, so he was diagnosed with rectal cancer, which was a massive, massive shock. I mean, he was 42. It wasn't even something. It had only just recently started showing symptoms. So through the lockdowns, we'd done a lot of fitness, we'd done a lot of walking, he'd done a lot of trying to lose weight. And he lost the weight he wanted to lose, and then he couldn't stop losing weight.
Oh, right.
He couldn't maintain. So he originally went to the doctors for a rash on his back. And they said, it's just an irritation, give him some cream. It didn't go away. So 6 weeks later, he went back and said, it's still here. And they're like, I'll try this steroid cream. And went away. And then he kind of left it and then went back. And it was only on the 3rd time that he happened to mention to his GP that he'd been feeling quite tired and that he couldn't maintain, he'd lost weight, but he couldn't keep it at a level. And she said, this one GP, she just said, I've been caught out with this before and I don't think it's anything, but can you just do this test? And it's it's called a Q-fit test. It's just a scrape sample that you put in the post and send away.
Mm-hmm.
And what that's testing for is basically that's testing for blood in your poo. And the results are supposed to come back with less than 10. Well, his come back at over 400.
Right.
So that was kind of the first thing. And then they said, we'll send you for a colonoscopy. I don't know what that is. It's where they put the camera up your bum.
Yeah. I know. I've had a couple.
So bearing in mind where I work, so I've got a lot of things going through my head, but I mean, all the sort of guidelines point you to things like Crohn's disease. That's quite common to be diagnosed in your 30s.
Yeah.
It's high in men. So that's what I kind of was thinking in my head. So I dropped him off for his colonoscopy. I thought, well, they've got to go through because it was COVID regulations still then, so you couldn't go in with anyone. You had to just basically drop people off outside. However, he'd been gone, we live about a 5-minute drive from the hospital, so I dropped him off, come home, and it wouldn't have been more than 25 minutes, and my phone rang. I thought, well, but it come up unknown number, which the hospital does, and I thought, well, it can't be him yet because he's not long been there. And this nurse said to me on the phone, she said, Miss Coleman, can you come down to the hospital? The doctor that's here wants to speak to you, but you and your husband together. And I just instantly knew. I knew what they were going to say. So they called us into this horrible little room and left us there waiting for a bit before the doctor come in. And he kind of sat down, and they hadn't been able to complete the test because the tumour was kind of blocking where they needed to go through. It was that large, so it was a really big tumour. So then we had other tests, CT scans, PET scans, before we went to see the surgeon who, said this is, a rectal cancer. At that point, they thought that with the right treatment beforehand, doing radiotherapy and chemo and then surgery, they were like, we think we can cure this. So that was all really, really positive. So he had his radiotherapy, and I worked in the radiotherapy department at the time. So that was super, super hard. Seeing my husband sitting in the waiting room in the department I worked in, that was really difficult. He absolutely smashed through his chemo, so strong, so determined. And he worked all the way through this. So the only times he took off work were the days he was having his chemo. And he had 5 days of radiotherapy, and he was off that week. But other than that, he went to work. And then he had his big surgery. And that was in the October. He was in hospital for like 12 days afterwards. And he came out, and when we went back to see the surgeon, she said, yeah, we've got it all. We took out the nodes, we've got clear margins. You're technically cancer-free. And with this sort of cancer, they do a blood test with a tumour marker called a CEA. And that's how they kind of track this sort of cancer. Different cancers have different markers with, but the CEA is this one. And so we had to have 3 monthly blood tests of the CEA on the tracker, just to monitor it. So the first one come back and it was fine. It was 1.2. It's supposed to be under 2.5 is kind of normal. And then by the second one, by the February, after we'd been told in the October he was cancer-free, by the February, his CEA had come back at 3.8. Oh. So I was a bit like, well, that's not right. It's not supposed to be going up. And then the following day, we got a letter in the post with another CT scan. So I phoned up the cancer nurse specialist, and I was like, is this scan because the CEA's gone up? And she was like, oh, well, he was having it anyway. We've just brought it forward a few weeks. It's nothing to worry about. So they did the CT scan, and they said, oh, it's a bit indeterminate. We're going to send you for another PET scan. So PET scans are only done at certain centres. And they do a contrast, which is completely measured to the person. Yeah. So, and it's made and it's sent down. It's all very precise. Again, another thing where I had to drop him off at Derriford Hospital, which is an hour away from here, wait for him to have that done, pick him up. And then you wait 2 weeks for the results. And we went into the oncologist's office, and he pulled up the scan on the screen, because they show you, they're really open, they show you everything. She pulled up the scan on the screen. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a PET scan, but a PET scan shows up where they think something's not right. It lights up. It kind of looks like you're on fire. So he started showing us, he said that there was a bit there was some residue in the abdomen, which was lighting up, which basically meant there was still something there. And then he kind of scrolled upwards, and he kept going upwards, and then he to some nodes in his neck that lit up. So that was his lymph nodes, and that's kind of how cancer travels into your lymph nodes. So that was more chemotherapy. So he did another 12 cycles of 2 weekly chemo. Absolutely smashed it as well. Absolutely smashed it. We worked all the way through it. He had the day off that he was on chemo, and when he had this pump. So they send you home with a pump, and it infuses you constantly for 48 hours, and then you go and have that removed. So, and you have to kind of stay home. You can't really do a lot because it's attached to you. So he worked all the way through that, and then we went back and they did another scan, and then there was something more. There was something in his lung that they found something new. So they've changed his chemo again. So he's on different tablets now. And we're just seeing how we get on with them, waiting for another scan.
I'm kind of speechless.
It's massive. It's life changing. I think now we know that, sorry, the dog's got upset about somebody. Hello, thank you. Yeah, so now obviously we have been told that this isn't something they can cure. It's something they can try and control for as long as possible.
Right.
And we just have to see how things go.
Oh, fucking hell. I mean, I'm obviously sorry to hear all this. I'm literally lost for words. I don't know what to say. How was it affecting everyone in the family then?
And that's the thing. So with the children, I think it's really brought out how different they all are.
Right.
We've had lots of emotional conversations. We've had. The problem is with me is I've always been honest with the kids, so I won't lie to them. But at the moment, there's so many questions that I can't answer, and I find I'm in a really difficult place not being able to answer.
Yeah.
Because we don't know.
Yes, so you can't assure them, no. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and the older two boys kind of aren't so much the big talkers. They don't kind of think about it so much. I mean, they do think about it, but they don't really talk about it a lot. They haven't asked a lot of questions. They've kind of everything we've told them, this is happening now, that's happening now. They've been really just kind of took and gone, okay. And then our daughter and my 18-year-old son, they're probably the more emotional pair, and they've asked lots of questions. We've had lots of tears, lots of uncertainties, lots of what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? And then our youngest, we've kind of just fed him the information as things have gone along with, like, this is happening now. This is what's happening next. This is what Dad's taking now. And he's kind of just took it on the chin. It's part of his life. I've gone through things where I can completely fall apart and stop, but you can't stop. It's about now learning to kind of live with it.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be part of us now. For as long as it can be.
It's just, I literally am speechless. I mean, I just don't know what to say. I remember when my mother was diagnosed with cancer. She had lung cancer twice, and she survived it both times. Where I was a young squaddy serving in Germany at the time, and the only reason they found it was because she'd come out to visit my brother, he was in Royal Signals, and he was at RAF Weldenrath, and she collapsed while she was visiting him, and went into a coma. And when they did all, they took her, I can't remember what hospital it was, I think it was Munster Hospital, BMH Munster. It was only because she went in there that they found out that everything else was wrong with her, and that she had basically done the test and she had lung cancer, and she was put in she was given like kind of weeks to live and all that type of thing. And she survived for 20 odd years, and it wasn't the cancer that killed her in the end, it was just old age. So, it was like she was put in a hospice twice. She met Princess Diana while she was in the hospice, and the hospice kept sending her home. Says, "You're wasting the bed. Go on." How are you holding up yourself?
No way. I think I'm probably more of the overthinker.
Yeah.
I think because I at work I see every extremity of this. And because I'm so involved in the patient's journeys, I kind of probably have too much knowledge.
Yeah, I kind of get that, yeah.
I think things, it works both ways. I mean, we've sat in doctor's offices and we've been told things, and kind of like Pete's quite happy. He's just like, okay, we'll try that next. But I'm sat with the consultant going, and what about this? What about surgery? What about radiotherapy? What about Sabre? And firing all the questions, because that's the knowledge I have. I know all these things that can be done. And he has to then sit there and explain to me why that won't work for this particular type or this particular area. So I'm sure I'm an absolute joy.
I was going to say, I can imagine him thinking, oh, she's right annoying, get.
And also it's hard because I know these doctors, I know all the nurses that have treated him. I knew the
Yeah.
radiographers who did radiotherapy. They're all like colleagues and friends of mine. So that's been really, really tough. Really tough.
Right. But when you think about it as well, it's probably tough on them, knowing used to, personally, and having to treat them with that. I wonder how they feel about it. I suppose they have to just distance themselves in the end, but it must have not affect them, but it must weigh on their mind as well.
It's hard, and I think some days I go into work and I do escape, like thinking about things at home, because you have to separate work and home because that's really
Yeah.
important, and I can do that. But then you get somebody who comes in and goes, "Oh, how is he? How's things?" And until someone asks me that, I'm generally okay.
Yeah.
Generally okay.
Well, I won't ask.
No, I have kind of had a thought this week. Like, I've always been a bit like, I don't really need sort of any counselling. I don't need to speak to anyone because I'm everyone's support. Like, so I'm the rock, aren't I? I've got him to look after. I've got the kids to look after. So as long as I'm doing that, I feel like I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
But I've kind of been thinking this week that maybe, probably for me, I need to speak to somebody else. So I've got brilliant family. I've got a brilliant sister who's like my best friend. They live locally. I've got some brilliant friends, but I still feel like probably somebody completely removed from that situation.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
probably
Somebody you can just talk to. Or
yeah.
get anything off your chest type of thing. How about the kids? I mean, do you not think that it's something like that would help them?
Yeah, so they've all so our daughter's at university, so she's got access to things like that if she wanted to engage with that. Our eldest son's in the army, and they're fully aware there, so he's got access if he wanted to engage in those services. At the moment, my 18-year-old, he doesn't really want to, although he's probably the one that should.
Yeah.
And the youngest is still in school, and they're aware, and they've got a really good support system there. So the doors are open for everybody.
Yeah.
And we've kind of worked that and made sure that.
I mean,
But sometimes,
sorry, come on.
I think sometimes though everyone gets a bit sick of talking about it. I know that like Pete gets sick of talking about it. He wants people just to talk to him normally about normal things. Like everyone wants to know how he is all the time, and sometimes
Yeah.
he's like, well, he'd rather talk about the football.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally appreciate that, and it's hard. It's that thing in it. It's that word, cancer. People don't know what to do when you know someone who's got it. You're just like, it's still classed as a scary, dirty word. It scares
Yeah,
people.
it does scare it.
I know, I've got friends and family who've obviously had it and stuff like that, and I know a couple of guys who are going through it now, and they're like, they shrug their shoulders at it and say, "No, it is what it is. We just get on with it."
Yeah,
And I'm thinking, do I ask about it? Do I just ignore it? And I take my lead off them, and basically, we don't talk about it. How we doing? Yeah, I'm all right. That's
it. Yeah,
that's the conversation, and then you change this conversation, and you go on and talk about something else, that type of thing.
I think it's really easy for it to completely consume you. So you have to kind of keep a sense of normality. So I said to the kids, just carry on living your lives, carry on doing what you want to do. Be the best you can be, make us proud, do that.
Yeah,
I haven't had any times off work. I've had a few days here and there, but I've been to work the whole time. Pete's always in work, and it's kind of like that's probably the best way. I think for us, that is definitely the best way for us to approach it. Just carry on, do things, make memories, live our lives, because who knows what the future holds.
yeah. It's that other thing where they say, if you can't control what's going to happen, so try not to worry about it too much. Which is, I mean, it's easy for me to say that in my situation because I'm not in yours, but I was always taught that by my parents, especially when my mum was suffering. They said, "Look, you can't do anything about it. Don't fucking worry about it." And I'm like, "All right, yeah, great." It's like, for example, my dad got diagnosed with dementia. Um, Bloody hell, 5, 6 years ago. So I went down to see him when he was still living in his bungalow, and I was like, "Right, what's happening? What's happening?" And he just looked at me and goes, "Well, I don't know." I said, "Well, you've been diagnosed with this. What's going to happen?" He went, "I don't know, nothing." I said, "You're not bothered?" He goes, and he just looked me straight in the face and said, "Don't fucking bother me. I won't remember anything, will I?" I just burst out laughing. I literally burst out laughing, and that's what broke it for me, for him. I just thought every time I seen him later on when he was really ill, I just thought, he's fucking laid there laughing at us. Because he didn't give a shit, he doesn't remember that type of thing, you know. There's always like that, the funny side of stuff you've got to try and hold on to and look onto, yeah.
But you have moments. You have moments where you have upset, you have thoughts, and that's just natural. But you've got to make sure that you have more moments that aren't like that.
Yeah. You just got to crack on.
Crack on, carry on, do what we do, be a family. And as much as this whole thing with the cancer is absolute shite, it is shit. I still feel blessed to have a husband who means everything to me and 5 beautiful children that, I feel blessed to have that as a family.
But no, that's gorgeous. Honestly, it is. And I think that'll do us for this podcast then. Because I've run out of things to ask you, really. It's been lovely speaking to you again. And, good luck for the future and good luck to your husband. Well, thanks for getting this far, and I hope this episode was not so emotional. As you've heard, Clare and her family have been through a hell of a lot lately. Clare, I think, has proved to be a very strong individual, and I'm sure that, along with me, you will be sharing a family all the best for the future.